I stopped under the awning at the hall's entrance, shaking the rain from my wet shawl when I heard my daughter's voice coming from the main hall. The words that reached my ears shattered my soul in a way I will never forget. Oh, thank goodness the old lady didn't show up. I was scared to death she'd come after I told her it was better if she didn't. The laughter that followed those words pierced my heart like an icy lightning bolt. It was Alana, my Alana, talking about me as if I were a heavy burden in her most important life moment. The comforting voice of her best friend since high school responded with complicity. Oh, girl, you were smart to discourage her from coming. Imagine what embarrassment it would be having to put up with your mama giving her opinion about everything at your own wedding. I felt as if they had taken the air from my lungs. During 67 years of life, I had never experienced such deep and cruel pain. The daughter I raised alone after her father Harold died 12 years ago. The little girl I cradled in my arms when she had fever, whom I consoled through every romantic disappointment, whom I supported in every important decision. She was celebrating my absence on the most significant day of her existence. I remained motionless under the rain, invisible to guests who were running toward the interior of the hall to protect themselves from the downpour. The words continued reaching me like precise blows. Derek the groom commented with a chuckle. Your mama's always been pretty intense, right? Good thing you convinced her not to come. Alana laughed again. Intense is a nice way of saying clingy. She's always wanted to control everything in my life. Today is my day. Finally, I can do things my way without having her hovering over me. Each word was a painful revelation about how my own daughter really perceived me. I, who thought I was being a present and loving mother, was seen as controlling and annoying. I, who sacrificed my own dreams to ensure she had all the opportunities I never had, was considered a hindrance to her happiness. The rain kept falling mercilessly, but my tears were hotter than any storm. I remained standing there, getting soaked, listening as my daughter and her guests celebrated my absence. Y'all see how my mama dresses, continued Alana, always in those old-fashioned dresses and those shawls that smell like mothballs. I was so embarrassed that people would see her and think that's how we are. Her friend added, Besides, you know how older ladies are. They always want to be the center of attention, always have something to criticize. Your wedding isn't the place to deal with mother-in-law drama. Derek, whom I had received in my house for 2 years as if he were my own son, who had eaten at my table hundreds of times, who had listened patiently to my stories about Alana when she was little, nodded with complicity. My mama always says mothers-in-law are like hot sauce. A little goes a long way, but they sure can ruin a good meal. Better to keep them away from important celebrations. Everyone laughed heartily. Everyone laughed at me. The woman who had worked double shifts as a domestic caregiver for 15 years to pay for Alana's college. The woman who sold her gold earrings, a wedding gift from her own mother, to buy the computer she needed for her studies. The woman who got up at 4 in the morning to prepare special breakfasts when she had important exams. The woman who had saved penny by penny for years to be able to contribute financially to this same wedding that was now celebrating my absence. Slowly, I turned around and walked back toward my car, leaving the rain-soaked gift on the entrance floor. My grandmother Claudine's porcelain china, which I had kept with so much love for decades, was left there abandoned under the rain, just as I had been abandoned by my own blood. But as I drove back home with trembling hands on the steering wheel and tears clouding my vision, something inside me began to change. A new coldness, a determination I had never felt before, started growing in my chest. What they didn't know was that Claudine Marie Ellis wasn't the defenseless old lady they thought they knew. I arrived home completely soaked, but strangely serene. My small brick house in Charleston's historic district, which I had bought with Harold's life insurance money, had never seemed as welcoming and safe as it did that night. I took off the navy dress I had chosen with such excitement and put on my most comfortable house robe. Then I prepared a cup of chamomile tea with honey, just as my mother had taught me when I was a child, and sat in my wicker rocking chair to process what I had just experienced. Throughout my entire life, I had defined my worth as a person through my ability to care for others. First as an obedient daughter, then as a devoted wife, and finally as a sacrificing mother. Harold always told me that I was the heart of our family, the one who held everything together with my unconditional love. When he passed from a massive heart attack 12 years ago, I promised at his grave that I would take care of Alana until my last breath. I thought I was fulfilling that promise in the best possible way, but tonight I had discovered a brutal truth. My unconditional love had been interpreted as weakness. My dedication had been seen as interference. My presence had been felt as a burden. The phone rang 3 times during the night. It was Alana. I didn't answer. For the first time in my life as a mother, I simply didn't answer my daughter's calls. On the answering machine, which Alana had given me last year to keep me connected with the modern world, her messages accumulated. First, she sounded worried. "Mama, why didn't you come to the wedding?" "I'm concerned." "Call me." Then annoyed. "Mama, it's very late and you haven't answered. This isn't normal for you." "Call me now," finally irritated. "Mama, you're being very dramatic. It's my wedding night and you have me worried. Call me tomorrow when you get over your tantrum." She had called my pain over discovering that my own daughter had conspired to publicly humiliate me a tantrum. I got up from the rocking chair and went to my bedroom. In the closet behind my Sunday dresses, I had a shoebox where I kept my most important documents. I opened it carefully and reviewed each paper. House deeds, insurance policies, investment certificates, bank accounts, everything Harold had left carefully organized for me before dying. Alana had no idea what this box contained. She had always assumed that I lived solely on my pension as a domestic worker, a modest amount that barely covered basic expenses. What she didn't know was that Harold had been a much more forward-thinking man than he appeared. During our 25 years of marriage, he had quietly invested in small properties and savings accounts, always thinking about our future and our daughter's future. When he died, he left me a considerable estate that I had managed discreetly, without ostentation, without showing off, because that's how my mother had raised me. Well-earned money doesn't need to be flaunted. I counted the documents. 3 small rental houses in the historic district, a savings account with interest that had grown considerably in 12 years, 2 lots near Magnolia Plantation that Harold bought thinking about building a country house for our old age, and several insurance policies that matured on different dates. In total, an estate that would allow anyone to live comfortably without working for the rest of their life. For years I kept this information private because I didn't want Alana to feel obligated to care for me out of economic interest. I wanted our relationship to be genuine, based on true love, not on inheritance expectations. How ironic this decision turned out to be. By keeping my economic situation secret, I had allowed my daughter to see me as an economic burden, in addition to an emotional one. But now things were going to change. The next morning, I woke up with a mental clarity I hadn't experienced in years. While I quietly ate my breakfast of grits with honey and fresh biscuits, I made the first real decision of my new life. I was going to seek out Mr. Luther Daniels, the lawyer who had handled Harold's legal affairs. He was a man of integrity, with silver hair and real experience, who knew perfectly the economic situation my husband had left me. First I called to make an appointment. "Mrs. Claudine Marie, what a pleasure to hear from you. How are you? Do you need any special paperwork?" His voice sounded genuinely happy to hear from me. It was the first person in months who seemed pleased to talk with me. "Mr. Daniels, I need to make some important changes to my will. Could you receive me this afternoon?" There was a pause. "Of course, ma'am. Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfectly fine, Mr. Daniels. For the first time in a long time, everything is very clear." I arrived at his office dressed in my best tailored suit, the navy one with gold buttons that I had bought for Alana's college graduation 6 years ago. I had my hair done at Miss Carmen's beauty salon and wore the pearl earrings Harold gave me on our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look like the respectable and determined woman I really was, not like the vulnerable old lady my family thought I was. Mr. Daniels received me in his office with his usual courtesy, but I noticed curiosity in his eyes. "Mrs. Claudine Marie, it's wonderful to see you as well." How may I help you? I settled into the chair across from his desk and breathed deeply. Mr. Daniels, I want to create a foundation. His eyebrows raised slightly. What type of foundation? For older mothers who have been abandoned or humiliated by their children. I want my estate to be used to help women who have gone through experiences similar to mine. I told him everything. The wedding, the cruel words, the public humiliation, the gift abandoned under the rain. Mr. Daniels listened in silence, occasionally shaking his head in disapproval. When I finished my account, he took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. Mrs. Claudine Marie, I'm deeply sorry you went through that experience. No mother deserves to be treated that way, especially a woman like you who has sacrificed so much for her family. We spent 3 hours reviewing documents and structuring the legal changes. Each signature was a step toward my emotional freedom. The Grace and Dignity Foundation would receive 70% of my estate immediately and the remaining 30% after my death. Alana would inherit only the house where I lived, and only after I was no longer present in this world. Everything else would be dedicated to helping women in my situation. Are you completely certain about this decision, Mrs. Claudine Marie? The lawyer asked me before proceeding with the final documents. Mr. Daniels, for 67 years, I have made decisions based on what others needed or wanted. This is the first time in my life that I make a decision based solely on what I consider right and just. I have never been more certain of anything. When I left the lawyer's office that afternoon, I carried in my purse a certified letter addressed to Alana. In this letter, I calmly explained that I had decided to dedicate my inheritance to a cause I considered more worthy than supporting ingratitude. There would be no shouting, accusations, or drama, just clear and definitive communication about my new life priorities. I also carried something else, a copy of the founding documents of the Grace and Dignity Foundation, which would be published in the local newspaper next week. I wanted the entire neighborhood to know exactly what type of daughter I had raised and what type of mother I had decided to be from now on. That evening, Miss Thelma, my neighbor of 30 years, appeared at my door with a plate of fresh cornbread. Claudine Marie, how was Alana's wedding? I want to hear all the details. Her enthusiasm reminded me how much I had anticipated this moment. For months I had bragged to all the neighbors about my daughter's wedding. I had shown photos of the dress. I had talked about the preparations. How could I explain now that there were no details to tell? Because I discovered that my own daughter had discouraged me from attending her wedding. I invented an excuse about not feeling well, but Miss Thelma knows me too well. We've been neighbors since Alana was a little girl. She's seen how I raised my daughter alone, how I worked double shifts, how I sacrificed to give her everything she needed. Claudine Marie, something happened. You have a very strange look on your face. Her genuine concern broke me again. I told her everything, from the rain to the cruel words I heard at the hall door. Miss Thelma became furious. What ingratitude, after everything you've done for that girl. But her anger, though comforting, didn't heal the pain I felt. And what are you going to do now? She asked me. I already did what I had to do, Thelma. I made decisions I should have made years ago. I showed her the foundation documents. Her eyes opened wide as saucers. Claudine Marie, you had all this money? Harold was very forward-thinking. He always wanted to secure my future. And does Alana know? Alana is going to find out very soon. Tomorrow she receives a certified letter with all the information. Miss Thelma whistled softly. Oh, Claudine Marie, this is going to be a scandal in the whole neighborhood. Well, let it be a scandal, Thelma. I'm tired of living my life trying to avoid scandals. Sometimes scandals are necessary for the truth to come to light. That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply. I didn't wake up worrying if Alana had gotten home safely after the party. I didn't wonder if she had eaten enough or if she needed anything. I didn't plan what to cook to take to her on the weekend. For the first time in years, my mind was completely at peace, focused solely on my own well-being. The next day, very early in the morning, I walked to the post office to personally send the certified letter. Mrs. Alana Ellis Cole would receive it before noon. Then I returned home, prepared my favorite breakfast, cheese grits with butter and honey. exactly as I liked them, not as she preferred them, and sat in my back patio to water my herb garden of mint and basil. While watering my plants, I reflected on all the years I had spent justifying my daughter's actions, excusing her gradual distancing, interpreting her coldness as natural young independence. I had normalized her lack of interest in my life, her way of changing the subject when I told my stories, her impatience when I needed help with something. But the humiliation at the wedding had been the straw that broke the camel's back. There was no longer any way to justify or rationalize what I had heard. The words had come out of her mouth so naturally, with such complicity, that it was obvious it hadn't been the first time she had spoken about me that way. She had probably been complaining about her clingy mother for years, with her friends, with her boyfriend, with anyone who wanted to listen. The phone started ringing at 11:30 in the morning. I didn't answer. It kept ringing every 10 minutes for the next 2 hours. I didn't answer. At 2 in the afternoon, I heard a car engine parking in front of my house with great haste. Then I heard hurried footsteps on my gravel driveway, followed by desperate knocking on my door. Mama, open up. I need to talk to you." It was Alana. Her voice sounded between panic and rage. She had received the letter. I finished watering my plants calmly. I washed my hands carefully. I smoothed my hair in front of the hallway mirror and finally went to open the door. My daughter was standing at my entrance, still dressed in clothes from the day before, with deep circles under her eyes and smeared makeup. In her trembling hands was the certified letter she had just opened. Her eyes were red, but I couldn't tell if it was from crying or from the rage I could clearly see in her expression. "Mama, what is this? You can't be serious." I looked directly into her eyes for the first time in years without feeling the automatic need to calm her or protect her feelings. "I am completely serious, Alana. I made a very thoughtful decision about how to use my estate. But Mama, this is ridiculous. You can't donate all our money to strangers. Our money." Interesting choice of words for someone who had never shown the slightest interest in my finances. "It's not our money, Alana, it's my money. The money your father left to me and that I have managed alone for 12 years. She was speechless for a moment, processing the reality that her mother had had financial autonomy all this time without her knowing it. "But why? What did I do wrong?" And there was the question I had been waiting for. I invited her to pass into the living room. I offered her fresh sweet tea. We sat like two polite strangers, maintaining physical and emotional distance. The air between us was thick, with years of misunderstandings and unexpressed resentments. "Alana," I began with the calmest voice I could manage. "Yesterday I heard a very revealing conversation." Her face went pale immediately. "What conversation?" "The conversation where you said you were relieved that the old lady hadn't appeared at your wedding. The conversation where you called me clingy and said you could finally do things your way without having me hovering over you." The silence that followed lasted several eternal minutes. Alana tried to deny, then minimize, then explain that she was nervous and didn't mean it seriously. "Mama, you know I didn't mean that." I was stressed. People say silly things when they're nervous. "Alana, during 67 years of life, I have learned that people show who they really are when they think no one is listening. You showed very clearly how you really feel about me." I calmly explained that the Grace and Dignity Foundation was already being structured, that 70% of my estate would be donated immediately and the rest after my death. She would inherit only the house where I lived, and only after I was no longer here. Her attempts to convince me became increasingly desperate. She promised weekly visits, daily calls, inclusion in all important family decisions. It was as if she was reading from a list of obedient daughter obligations she had prepared on the way to my house. "Mama, can I change? We can fix this. Just give me a chance." "Alana, when you were 10 years old and got pneumonia, I slept in a chair next to your bed for 5 days. When you cried over your first boyfriend who broke your heart, I canceled my extra shifts at work to stay with you. When you needed money for college, I sold my gold earrings without hesitation. At no point did it occur to me that those gestures were dramatic or clingy. They were gestures of unconditional love. My voice remained serene throughout this entire conversation, which seemed to disturb Alana more than any shouting would have done. When she got up to leave, she tried once more. "Mama, please, we can talk about this when you're calmer." I walked with her to the door and said, "Alana, I have never been calmer in my life. For the first time in years, I know exactly who I am and what I want to do with my remaining time in this world. But Mama, I'm your only family." I stopped at the threshold and looked directly into her eyes. "No, Alana, family doesn't humiliate. Family doesn't conspire to hurt. Family doesn't celebrate absences. You wanted me to disappear from your important life. So that's exactly what I did." I watched her drive away while I remained standing at my entrance, feeling freer than I had felt in decades. For the first time in my adult life, Claudine Marie Ellis was the complete owner of her own destiny. And that feeling was sweeter than any forced reconciliation could have been. After Alana left my house with the certified letter in her hands and her face decomposed by surprise, I stood at my doorway for several minutes, breathing the fresh afternoon air and feeling a strange mixture of relief and melancholy. For the first time in decades, I had made a decision completely by myself, without consulting anyone, without seeking approval, without worrying about hurting others' feelings. It was such a new feeling that it almost scared me. I closed the door slowly and walked toward my living room, where I sat in the armchair that had been Harold's, the green velvet one he had chosen when we bought our first furniture as a young couple. From there I could see the family photographs that decorated the fireplace mantel, Alana at her first communion, her high school graduation, her college graduation. In all those photos, I appeared smiling proudly at her side, with the radiant expression of a mother who had managed to raise her daughter against wind and tide. At what exact moment had that smiling little girl become the woman who celebrated my absence? I allowed memories to flow freely without trying to contain or rationalize them as I had done for years. I vividly remembered when Alana was 8 years old and broke her left wrist, falling off the new bicycle I had bought her with 6 months of savings. I spent 4 nights without sleeping in the public hospital, sleeping in an uncomfortable plastic chair next to her bed, holding her hand when she cried in pain, singing her the lullabies my own mother had sung to me. The doctors told me I could go home to rest, that she was stable, but I didn't move from there. How could I leave my little girl alone when she needed me? I remembered when she had her first heartbreak at 17. That boy, Carlos, had left her for another classmate after 6 months of dating. Alana came home crying inconsolably. She locked herself in her room and didn't want to eat for 2 days. I canceled my extra shifts at the textile factory, shifts I desperately needed to pay her tuition, and stayed with her stroking her hair, bringing her favorite meals, listening for hours to her laments about how unfair love was. I assured her she would find someone who would love her as she deserved, that Carlos wasn't worthy of her tears. In all those moments, I was her hero, the person she trusted completely, her safe refuge against the cruelties of the world. I also remembered the economic sacrifices I made without her even knowing about them. When she was 15 and wanted to go on the study trip to Savannah with her class, I sold my engagement ring, a simple band, but full of sentimental meaning, to gather the money. I told her I had saved by working overtime. When she needed a computer for her college projects, I sold the gold chain I had inherited from my grandmother. When she wanted to study at a private English academy because she said she wasn't learning well at public school, I worked cleaning offices on weekends for an entire year to pay the monthly fees. Each sacrifice I made with joy, feeling proud to be able to give her opportunities I never had. I thought I was building not only her future, but also a solid relationship based on mutual love and gratitude. I believed that when she was an adult, she would understand everything I had done for her and would thank me for it. I believed we would be best friends, confidants, companions for life. How naive I was. The sun was setting when Miss Thelma knocked on my door again. This time, she brought a pot of gumbo that smelled delicious and a worried expression on her wrinkled face. "Claudine Marie, I came to see how you're doing after Alana's visit. She looked very upset when she left." I invited her in and served her a large glass of sweet tea while she put the gumbo in my refrigerator. "How did she take the news about the foundation?" she asked with genuine curiosity. Miss Thelma had been a silent witness to my life for 3 decades. She had seen how I raised Alana alone after Harold's death. She had heard my concerns about money, my sleepless nights when my daughter was sick, my celebrations when she had academic success. If anyone could understand my decision, it was her. She was furious, Thelma. She didn't understand how I could donate our money to strangers. Miss Thelma frowned. "Our money? Since when is the money your husband left you also hers?" "Exactly what I thought. During all these years she's been married, she never asked about my economic situation, never offered to help me with anything, never showed interest in how I managed to make ends meet. But now that she knows there's money involved, suddenly it becomes our money." We sat in silence for a moment, drinking sweet tea and listening to the sounds of evening in the neighborhood. Children playing in the street, vendors calling out their products, mothers calling their children for dinner. Sounds that had been the soundtrack of my life for decades, but that I now heard with different ears. "You know what hurts me most, Thelma?" I finally asked. "It's not the ingratitude, though that hurts a lot. It's not even the public humiliation at her wedding. What hurts me most is realizing that for years I had been misinterpreting our relationship. I thought we were close, that my opinion mattered to her, that she enjoyed spending time with me. But now I understand that all this time she was tolerating me, enduring my presence, because she felt obligated." Miss Thelma shook her head sadly. "Oh, Claudine Marie, children nowadays are very different from before. Before, one respected parents, even if you didn't agree with them. Now they think they can treat us like nuisances." "But it's not just lack of respect, Thelma. It's that she really sees me as a burden." When she was talking to her friends at the wedding, her relief was genuine. She wasn't pretending to look good. She was genuinely happy that I hadn't shown up. This realization hurt me more than any direct shout or insult. At least open cruelty is honest. But discovering that for years I had been living in an illusion of mutual affection was devastating. That night, after Miss Thelma left, I dedicated myself to reviewing every corner of my house with new eyes. Every object told me a different story now that I knew the truth about my daughter's feelings toward me. The frame with her college graduation photo no longer filled me with maternal pride, but reminded me of all the times I asked her about her career, and she answered me with monosyllables, as if my questions were a bother. The embroidered tablecloth I had made for her first house no longer seemed like a beautiful gift, but a symbol of my need to be present in her life, in ways she clearly didn't want. The empty containers stacked in my kitchen, containers where I had sent homemade food for years, now seemed like evidence of my refusal to accept that she no longer wanted me to care for her like when she was a child. I sat in my bedroom in front of the vanity, where I kept my jewelry box, and opened the secret drawer where I had the few jewels I hadn't sold to finance Alana's dreams. A pair of pearl earrings, a silver bracelet, a gold butterfly brooch that had belonged to my mother, small pieces, but full of family history. For years I had reserved them, thinking that someday I would give them to Alana as an emotional inheritance, objects that would connect the women of our family through generations. Now I wondered if she would see them as family treasures, or simply as old things she would have to get rid of when I died. The phone rang at 10 at night. It was Alana again. This time I did answer, but not with the maternal anxiety of always. I answered with the calm of someone who had already made all the important decisions. "Mama, we need to talk more calmly. Derek and I want to come tomorrow to sit with you and resolve this as a family." "Derek wants to come?" I asked with genuine curiosity. "Since when does Derek get involved in my financial affairs?" "Well, he's my husband, Mama. What affects me also affects him. I understand. And when you made the decision to discourage me from going to the wedding, did you also consult that with him?" Silence. "Alana, you told me you were relieved that the old lady hadn't appeared. Did you also consult that opinion with your husband?" "Mama, please don't be like that. You're taking things out of context." "Out of context." Alana. You were at your own wedding, surrounded by your loved ones, on one of the happiest days of your life. In that context, you expressed relief at my absence. There's no clearer context than that. Another long silence. Look, tomorrow we're coming at 3 in the afternoon. Please, think about it well during the night. This doesn't have to be definitive. She hung up without waiting for my response. I couldn't sleep that night, but not from anxiety or sadness as I had expected. My mind was strangely active, processing decades of small details that now took on a completely different meaning. I remembered all the times Alana had changed the subject when I began to tell stories of my youth or her childhood. I remembered her impatience when I asked for help with technology, as if teaching her mother to use the ATM was a heavy burden. I remembered how she avoided taking me to social events from her work or her circle of friends, always with excuses about the type of people who went or the atmosphere that wasn't appropriate for me. But I also remembered good things, genuine moments of connection that couldn't have been completely fake. The times she arrived by surprise with my favorite dessert, the spontaneous calls to ask how I was, the long hugs when she left after visiting me. Had those moments also been acting, or were there two Alanas, one who genuinely loved me but was ashamed of that love, and another who saw me as an obstacle to the life she wanted to live? At 5 in the morning, I got up and prepared coffee with cinnamon, as my mother had taught me. I sat in my back patio to watch the sunrise and think about all the women in my family who had come before me. My great-grandmother Concepcion, who raised 8 children alone after my great-grandfather died in the war. My grandmother Esperanza, for whom I had named my daughter, who worked washing other people's clothes to send her children to school. My mother Claudine, who sewed until late hours to buy us new shoes for school. All of them had been strong women who had prioritized their families over themselves, but they had also been women who had kept their dignity intact. None of them would have tolerated the disrespect I had been normalizing for years. While I drank my coffee and watched the city slowly wake up, I had an important revelation. The problem hadn't been just Alana's attitude toward me. The problem had also been my attitude toward myself. For years I had accepted crumbs of affection as if they were complete banquets. I had interpreted tolerance as love, obligation as genuine caring, physical presence as emotional presence. I had been so afraid of losing my only daughter that I had allowed our relationship to deteriorate until it became something one-sided and dysfunctional. At 9 in the morning, before the scheduled visits arrived, I went to the Charleston Farmers Market to buy ingredients to make peach cobbler. It was a laborious dish that I normally prepared only for very special occasions, but I had my reasons for making it today. I wanted to keep my hands busy while I processed my emotions, and also wanted to have something delicious waiting for me after the difficult conversation I knew awaited me. At the market, Miss Carmen, the lady who sold the freshest peaches, greeted me with curiosity. "Claudine Marie, how was Alana's wedding? I didn't see you at church yesterday morning." In my neighborhood, news travels fast, and the absence of the bride's mother at the Sunday service following the wedding had definitely been noticed. "Miss Carmen, the wedding was revealing," I responded with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Sometimes one discovers things about the people you love that you would have preferred not to know." She nodded with wisdom. "Oh, honey, that happens a lot with children when they get married. They forget who raised them." "Exactly, Miss Carmen. But one also has to know when to stop reminding them. I bought the freshest ingredients I could find. Perfect peaches, brown sugar, sweet cream butter, vanilla beans. While walking back home with my market bags, I felt like a woman preparing for battle. Not a battle to win my daughter's love, that war I had already lost, but a battle to keep my own dignity intact. Back in my kitchen, I began the laborious process of preparing peach cobbler. Peeling the peaches carefully, slicing them perfectly, preparing the buttery crust, making the sweet filling with cinnamon and nutmeg. Each step required patience and precision, exactly what my mind needed. While I cooked, I reflected on the irony of the situation. For years I had cooked Alana's favorite dishes. I had adapted my recipes to her tastes. I had learned to make food she liked, even though it didn't excite me as much. Today I was cooking only for myself, preparing the dish I liked most, without considering anyone else's preferences at all. It was a strangely liberating feeling. At 2:30 in the afternoon, half an hour before the scheduled visit, the doorbell rang. It was Alana, but this time she came accompanied not only by Derek, but also by an older woman I didn't recognize immediately. When I opened the door, my daughter introduced me to the stranger with a forced smile. "Mama, I'd like you to meet Mrs. Bernice Cole, Derek's mother. We thought it would be good for her to be present in this conversation." Ah, they had brought reinforcements. Alana had decided she needed the presence of another maternal figure to convince me to change my mind. It was an astute strategy, I must admit. They probably thought I would feel pressured to behave more maternally and understandingly in the presence of my daughter's mother-in-law. But what they didn't know was that I was no longer interested in being the perfect mother who always says yes to everything. I politely invited them in and offered them fresh sweet tea. The kitchen smelled deliciously of peach cobbler, and I noticed how Derek inhaled the aroma with appreciation. "Smells wonderful, Mrs. Claudine Marie. Are you making peach cobbler?" "Yes, Derek, it's my favorite dish, though it's laborious to make." We sat in my living room. I immediately noticed the dynamic that had been established. Alana looked nervous. Derek seemed uncomfortable, and Mrs. Bernice had the expression of someone who had come with a specific mission. It was clear that all three had planned this conversation in advance. "Mrs. Claudine Marie," began Derek's mother with a soft but firm voice. "Alana has told me about the situation with your inheritance, and I wanted to come speak with you mother to mother." "Of course. Mrs. Bernice, what would you like to tell me?" "Well, as a mother I understand that sometimes our children hurt us without realizing it. Young people today speak without thinking, say things they don't really feel, but that doesn't mean we should punish them so severely." Interesting. So Alana had told her version of events, probably minimizing her cruel words and presenting herself as a victim of a dramatic and irrational mother. "Did Alana tell you exactly what I heard at her wedding?" I asked with genuine curiosity. "She told me there was a misunderstanding, that you misinterpreted some things she said when she was nervous." I looked directly at Alana. A misunderstanding, misinterpretation. My daughter couldn't hold my gaze. "Mama, I already explained that I was stressed." "Alana," I interrupted with a calm voice, "look Mrs. Bernice in the eyes and repeat to her exactly the words you said about me at your wedding." Word for word. The silence that followed was deafening. "Come on, child. If they were just words said from stress, if they were misunderstandings or erroneous interpretations, you shouldn't be embarrassed to repeat them." Alana turned red as a ripe tomato. Derek intervened. "Mrs. Claudine Marie, I think the point is that we can all get over it. Families forgive each other, right?" I responded calmly. "You were present when your wife expressed relief because I hadn't appeared at her wedding." "Well, I was there, yes. And did it seem appropriate to you?" Derek looked at Alana seeking help, but she still couldn't lift her gaze. "It was a difficult moment," he finally murmured. "Difficult for whom, Derek? For you who were celebrating my absence, or for me who was being publicly humiliated without knowing it?" Mrs. Bernice cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Claudine Marie, I understand you feel hurt, but don't you think this reaction is a bit extreme? Donating your entire estate over some words said in a moment of stress?" There was the key point. To the rest of the world, my reaction seemed disproportionate. A normal mother would have cried, complained, demanded an apology, but would have eventually forgiven. A normal mother wouldn't have completely reorganized her financial life in response to public humiliation. But I no longer wanted to be a normal mother. "Mrs. Bernice," I responded with the most serene voice I could manage. "Let me ask you a question. If you discovered that your son has been talking about you as a nuisance for years, that he's been faking affection out of obligation, that he celebrates when you're not present at important moments in his life, what would you do?" She had no answer for that, because that's what I discovered. It wasn't isolated words said from stress. It was the revelation of how my daughter really perceives me after 67 years of unconditional love on my part. I got up slowly and walked toward the kitchen. The peach cobbler is ready. Would you like to try some before we continue this conversation? All four of us followed me to the kitchen, where I served the dish I had prepared with so much care for myself. While we ate in uncomfortable silence, I reflected on how surreal the situation was. There I was, serving delicious food to the people who had come to convince me to give away my financial autonomy for the sake of maintaining family peace. It was, I thought while slowly chewing my perfect peach cobbler, the last act of maternal service I would perform out of obligation. From now on, all my generosity would be voluntary and deserved. After we finished eating the peach cobbler in a silence that thickened with each minute, we returned to the living room where the tension could be cut with a knife. Mrs. Bernice, my daughter's mother-in-law, cleared her throat, preparing for what had clearly been planned as the final argument that would make me change my mind. Mrs. Claudine Marie, she began with a maternal voice that pretended to be persuasive. I've been reflecting on what you told me. As a mother, I understand your pain perfectly, but think about it well. Is it really worth destroying a family over some words said without thinking? Her eyes looked at me with the typical condescension of someone who believes they're talking to a person who has lost their reason. Destroying a family, I repeated slowly, savoring the irony of those words. Who destroyed exactly what, Mrs. Bernice? Alana moved uncomfortably in her chair. Derek looked toward the floor as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. It was obvious they had expected the presence of an external maternal figure to make me more docile, more willing to yield for the sake of family harmony. Well, continued Mrs. Bernice, you're punishing Alana for a moment of weakness. Young people sometimes say cruel things when they're under pressure, but that doesn't mean they don't love you. I got up slowly and walked toward the shelf where I had my family photographs. I took a photo of Alana at her college graduation and held it in my hands, observing that radiant smile that had so excited me 6 years ago. Mrs. Bernice, do you believe true love is expressed by celebrating the absence of the loved person? No. But do you believe true love is expressed by feeling relief when that person doesn't appear at the most important moments? Mrs. Claudine Marie, you're taking things too much to heart. Do you believe true love is expressed by calling your mother clingy and controlling in front of strangers? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the street noise seemed to have stopped. I put the photograph back in its place and addressed myself directly to Alana, who continued avoiding my gaze. Child, look me in the eyes. Reluctantly, she lifted her gaze. For 27 years, I have loved you unconditionally. Is that true? Yes, Mama. For 27 years, I have sacrificed my own desires to ensure you had everything you needed. Is that true? Yes. For 27 years, I have been available every time you've needed me, regardless of the hour, regardless of my own plans. Is that true? Her voice broke slightly. Yes, Mama. Then explain to me, Alana. At what exact moment did I become the type of mother one feels relieved about when she doesn't show up? The tears began to roll down her cheeks, but I maintained my voice serene and my eyes firm on hers. I'll tell you when, child. I became that type of mother when you decided that my unconditional love was something you could take for granted. When you began to see my gestures of affection as obligations I had toward you, instead of gifts I gave you voluntarily. Derek finally spoke. Mrs. Claudine Marie, Alana is sorry. It's not enough. I turned toward him with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Derek, would you say my daughter seems sorry for having hurt me or sorry for having been discovered? He opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came out, because there's a very big difference between those two things. Mrs. Bernice made one last attempt at mediation. Look, Mrs. Claudine Marie, all fathers and mothers go through difficult moments with our children. It's part of life, but at the end of the day, family is the most important thing we have. You're right, I responded calmly. Family is the most important thing we have. That's why it's so important not to allow them to disrespect us. But you're being very extreme. Extreme, I interrupted her gently. Mrs. Bernice, let me tell you what's extreme. Extreme is working double shifts for 15 years to pay for your daughter's college. Extreme is selling your own mother's jewelry to buy her a computer. Extreme is canceling extra shifts you desperately needed to care for your daughter when she had a broken heart. That's extreme. I walked to the window and observed the street where I had lived for 30 years. Deciding how to use my own money in my final years of life isn't extreme. It's simple self-determination. Alana finally found her voice. Mama, please, I promise things are going to change. I'm going to be a better daughter. I turned toward her slowly. A better daughter. Alana, do you know what the problem is with that promise? She shook her head, crying silently. The problem is that you shouldn't have to promise me to be a good daughter at 27 years of age. That's something that should arise naturally from 27 years of love received. The fact that you have to promise it to me now means that for years you haven't been one. And that only now that there's money involved are you interested in changing. The words came out of my mouth with a clarity that surprised me. For decades I had avoided confrontations, had softened my opinions, had minimized my feelings to maintain peace. But something fundamental had changed in me. I was no longer afraid of saying uncomfortable truths. Besides, I continued, I don't want a daughter who treats me well out of obligation or interest. I want a daughter who treats me well because she genuinely cares about me. And that daughter, unfortunately, isn't you. Derek stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Alana, let's go. Your mama clearly isn't being rational. But Alana didn't move. She stayed sitting crying silently, processing probably for the first time in her adult life the real consequences of her actions. No, Derek, I said calmly. Alana can stay if she wants, but you and Mrs. Bernice can leave. This conversation is between my daughter and me. Mrs. Bernice looked clearly offended. Mrs. Claudine Marie, I came here with the best intentions. And I appreciate that, but the best intentions don't change the facts. The facts are that your daughter-in-law has been disrespecting me for years and that you came here hoping to convince me to ignore that for the sake of maintaining family appearances. Derek took his mother by the arm. Let's go, Mama. Alana, we'll wait for you in the car. When they left, the house was left in a strange silence. Only Alana and I were there, mother and daughter, finally facing the naked truth of our relationship after years of avoiding uncomfortable conversations. Why, Alana? I asked her when we were alone. Why did you come to see me as a nuisance? She wiped her tears with her blouse sleeve and breathed deeply before responding. I don't know, Mama. I think I got so used to you always being there that I stopped appreciating everything you did for me. When did you start feeling this way? Honestly, I think when I met Derek. He came from a family where parents were more distant, where they didn't get involved so much in their adult children's lives. And I started thinking that maybe that was the normal way, that maybe you were too present. It was the first time she had given me an honest answer in years, and it never occurred to you to talk to me about that, to ask me for a little more space respectfully. I was afraid of hurting you, but I also liked the comfort of having you always available. It was easier to complain about you to other people than to confront the situation directly. Her honesty was painful, but necessary. Alana, do you understand that when you decided it was better for me not to go to your wedding, you made the cruelest decision a daughter can make with her mother? Yes, I understand that now. Do you understand that for months you had me helping you with the preparations, making me believe that my presence was desired, when you were actually planning to exclude me? Yes. Do you understand that this wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness, but a planned betrayal? The silence extended for several minutes. Finally, Alana lifted her gaze and looked directly into my eyes for the first time in the conversation. Mama, is there anything I can do to fix this? Her question took me by surprise, not because I didn't expect it, but because I knew my answer was going to hurt her deeply. No, Alana. There's nothing you can do to fix this. Nothing? Nothing, because the damage isn't in what you did at your wedding. The damage is in discovering how you really see me after so many years of believing we had a close and loving relationship. I sat in the armchair across from her. maintaining a physical distance that reflected the emotional distance that now existed between us. Child, if tomorrow you started treating me wonderfully, if you called me every day, if you invited me to all your celebrations, if you showered me with attention, I would know you're doing it because you regret having lost an inheritance. Not because you genuinely care about me, and that would be even more painful than indifference. But Mama, I do love you. Alana, there are different types of love. There's the love you feel for someone because they're useful to you. And there's the love you feel for someone because that person enriches your life simply by existing. For years I thought you loved me the second way, but now I know you loved me the first way. She sat processing my words in silence. And you know what's the saddest thing about all this? I continued, that I myself contributed to this situation. I taught you that my love was unconditional, without teaching you that my respect for you depended on how you treated me. I gave you so much, without expecting anything in return, that you never learned to value what you received. The sun was beginning to set, filling my living room with a golden light that made everything seem unreal. Alana and I had been talking for hours, but for the first time in years, we had been really communicating instead of simply exchanging polite words. Mama, what's going to happen now? She asked with a small voice. Now you're going to live your life, and I'm going to live mine. Does that mean we're never going to have a relationship again? It means we're going to have whatever relationship you choose. If you decide you want to really know the woman I am, beyond just seeing me as your provider mother, maybe we can build something new. But it's going to have to be something completely different from what we've had until now. And the foundation, it's definitive. Completely definitive. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to sign the last documents. By Friday, the Grace and Dignity Foundation is going to be officially established and operating. Alana nodded slowly, finally accepting that her mother wasn't the malleable woman she had known for 27 years. Can I ask you something, Mama? Of course. Are you happy with this decision? The question caught me off guard because no one had asked me about my happiness in decades. It had always been about what others needed, wanted, or expected from me. You know what, Alana? Yes. For the first time in many years, I am completely happy with the decision I've made. I feel at peace with myself, even though that means losing you. Child, I lost you a long time ago. I just hadn't realized it until now. Those words hurt both of us, but they were the purest truth that had come out of my mouth in years. Alana got up slowly like a woman who had aged 10 years in one afternoon. I guess I'm leaving. I guess so. At the door, she turned one last time. Mama, is there any chance that someday you might be able to forgive me? I already forgave you, Alana, but forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it definitely doesn't mean going back to how things were before. What does it mean then? It means I don't hold a grudge against you. It means I wish you happiness in your marriage and in your life. But it also means I'm no longer going to allow people to disrespect me, and I'm no longer going to pretend that cruel words don't matter when they come from people we love. After she left, I remained standing at my door for several minutes, breathing the fresh evening air and feeling something I hadn't felt in years. The deep satisfaction of having defended my own dignity. That night, for the first time since the wedding, I slept deeply. I didn't wake up worrying about Alana. I didn't wonder if she had gotten home safely. I didn't plan what to cook to take to her on the weekend. My mind was completely at peace, focused solely on my own plans for the future. The next day, very early in the morning, I dressed in my best suit, the navy one with gold buttons that made me feel powerful, and headed to Mr. Daniels's office to sign the final foundation documents. The lawyer received me with an approving smile. Mrs. Claudine Marie, how do you feel the day before officially changing your life? I feel free, Mr. Daniels, truly free. We spent an hour reviewing the final details. The Grace and Dignity Foundation would have its headquarters in a small but dignified office in downtown Charleston. I would be the founding president with a modest salary that would allow me to live comfortably while I dedicated myself to helping other women in similar situations. The rest of the money would be used to provide legal, psychological, and economic support to mothers who had been abandoned or mistreated by their families. "Have you thought about how you're going to advertise the foundation's services?" the lawyer asked me. "I've thought about giving an interview to the local newspaper. I think it's important that women in the community know they're not alone if they're going through similar experiences. Doesn't the negative publicity worry you? Your story is going to be very well known in the neighborhood. Mr. Daniels, for 67 years I've lived my life trying to avoid people talking about me. And you know what I discovered? They talk anyway. The difference is that now they're going to talk about a woman who defended herself, instead of talking about a woman who endured mistreatment in silence." When we finished signing all the papers, the lawyer shook my hand with genuine respect. "Mrs. Claudine Marie, I've worked with many people during transition moments in their lives, but I've rarely seen someone make decisions as brave and well thought out as yours. Thank you, Mr. Daniels, though I must confess I don't feel brave. I just feel tired of living the life others expected me to live." On my way home, I stopped at the farmer's market to buy fresh ingredients to make myself a delicious meal. This time I bought only what I liked: fresh collard greens with smoked turkey, cornbread with honey butter, sweet tea, and peach cobbler for dessert. I didn't have to consider anyone else's tastes. I didn't have to calculate portions for uninvited guests. I didn't have to wonder if someone else was craving something different. It was the first meal I bought thinking solely of my own pleasure, and I felt strangely giddy, like a little girl who had just discovered she could eat candy for breakfast. In my kitchen, while preparing my favorite meal, I reflected on all the changes that had occurred in my life in less than a week. I had gone from being a dedicated but invisible mother to being an independent woman with a clear purpose. I had gone from living for others to living for myself. I had gone from fearing loneliness to celebrating autonomy. And most importantly, I had gone from being a victim of circumstances to being the architect of my own destiny. The phone rang while I was eating my collard greens. It was Alana. This time I answered, but not with the maternal anxiety of before. "Hello, Alana. Mama, I saw in the newspaper the announcement about the foundation. It's official now?" "Completely official. Tomorrow I have my first appointment with a lady who wants to tell me her story." There was a long silence. "Mama, will you ever be able to be proud of me again?" Her question touched my heart, but didn't change my resolution. "Alana, I will always be proud of your achievements. You have an excellent education, a stable job, a marriage. Those are things any mother can be proud of. But proud of you as a person? Child, that's a question only you can answer. I can't be proud of someone who doesn't respect herself enough to respect others. When you learn to treat yourself with dignity, you'll probably also learn to treat others with dignity." "I don't understand." "Alana, a woman who respects herself doesn't celebrate the humiliation of her own mother, because she understands that if she allows that, she's teaching the world that older women don't deserve respect. And someday she'll also be an older woman." After hanging up, I finished my meal in perfect peace, savoring each bite as if it were the first of my new life, because in many ways it was. 3 weeks after signing the Grace and Dignity Foundation documents, my life had taken a completely different direction. Every morning I woke up with a clear purpose, helping women who had gone through experiences similar to mine. The small office in downtown Charleston had become my second home, a place where the tears of betrayed mothers transformed into action plans and renewed hope. My first beneficiary had been Miss Dorothy, a 72-year-old lady whose 3 sons had decided it was time to sell her house for her own good and put her in a nursing home. With our lawyer's help, we managed to stop the sale and establish a trust that guaranteed she could live in her home until her natural death. The expression of relief on her face when we signed the documents reminded me why I had made the right decision. It was Friday afternoon when I heard my doorbell ring insistently. When I opened the door, I found Derek standing at my entrance, but this time he came alone, without Alana or his mother. He looked exhausted, with deep circles under his eyes and an expression of defeat that surprised me. "Mrs. Claudine Marie, may I speak with you?" I invited him in and offered him sweet tea. We sat in my living room, where barely 3 weeks before the confrontation that changed my life forever had taken place. "How is Alana?" I asked him. Not from maternal anxiety, but from basic courtesy. "That's precisely the problem," Derek responded, running his hands through his hair nervously. "Mrs. Claudine Marie, Alana isn't well. Since you established the foundation, she's been different." "Different how?" "She's obsessed with what happened. She reads the newspaper article about the foundation every day. She's been researching other similar organizations. She doesn't sleep well, barely eats, and she's constantly talking about you." I remained quiet, waiting for him to continue. "Yesterday, she confessed something to me that left me frozen. She told me that for years she had been ashamed of you, but now she realizes she should have been ashamed of herself." His words touched my heart, but I maintained my neutral expression. "She told me about all the times you sold your things to give her opportunities. She told me about the extra jobs, about the sleepless nights when she was sick, about everything you sacrificed to raise her alone. And she told me that for years she interpreted all that as pressure and control, when it was really pure love." Derek stopped and looked directly into my eyes. "Mrs. Claudine Marie, my wife is devastated. Not because of the money, but because she lost the only person who loved her unconditionally throughout her entire life." "Derek," I responded calmly, "I appreciate you coming to tell me this, but what do you expect me to do with that information?" "I don't know. Maybe talk to her, give her a chance to really apologize." "And what do you think about all this?" Derek lowered his gaze, clearly uncomfortable. "Honestly, Mrs. Claudine Marie, at first I thought you were exaggerating. But after living with Alana these 3 weeks, seeing how devastated she is, I started to understand that maybe we were the ones who didn't understand the gravity of what had happened." "We?" "Yes, I also participated in that conversation at the wedding. I also expressed relief at your absence, and now I realize that was very wrong." It was the first time Derek assumed responsibility for his part in the humiliation. That surprised me pleasantly. "Derek, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer me with total honesty." "Of course. If I hadn't had money, if I were really the poor old lady you thought I was, would you be here asking me to forgive your wife?" The silence that followed was eloquent. "Exactly," I continued. "Alana's repentance arrived exactly at the same time as the discovery of my economic situation. That's not coincidence, Derek. That's opportunism disguised as remorse.